Spatial navigation. It's something we do every day. Like all animals, we need to find our way in the world. And like animals, we as humans exhibit sex differences in spatial navigation. But why? An evolutionary anthropology perspective is one of several ways to examine and break down this question that puzzles many researchers across various disciplines. This video will discuss spatial navigation from an evolutionary anthropologist's perspective by considering how an evolutionist might approach this interdisciplinary research question. Why are there sex differences in spatial navigation? Like our ancestors, we share basic needs for survival, like food, shelter, and kinship. These needs help inform what we call a home range, an area which one navigates to meet these needs. Now consider your first week at UCSB. If you were like me, you might have gotten lost, or at least were not always entirely sure how to find your way to a certain building or classroom, especially as you were getting acclimated to a new routine and in a new physical and social environment. Maybe you use what we call landmark cues, like the Stork Tower to navigate to the U-Send for a familiar dish after a long, rough day. Maybe you use distal cues like the ocean or the foothills to help navigate and find your way back home when the sun was quickly setting. At this point, I would like you to take out a piece of paper and a pencil or pen, and I'd like you to draw a mini map of your world with at least 3 of the following marked locations. Where do you live? Where do you get food? Where does your significant other, could be your boyfriend, girlfriend, best friend, or partner, or family member, live? Go ahead and pause the video for right now, and once you've finished, come back and hit play. Okay, now that you've made your map, just put it aside for a second. We're going to come back to this. Evolution itself is simply a process of trial and error across the generations. Evolutionists try to answer the question, why did we evolve the way we did, by considering the history of what worked and what didn't work. Consider an audition or tryout. The player who performs best gets to stay in the game or stay in the show. In the case of evolution, it's genetic traits that are auditioning for the future. Some get passed on because they are helpful, and others are weeded out because they aren't helpful. These traits have faced a great range of challenges with widely different kinds of tasks, kinds of auditions, so to speak. So what ends up determining whether a trait works or doesn't work can vary. This is why what sometimes works for one sex doesn't always work as well for the other. An evolutionary standpoint reminds us that our survival as a species can be traced to certain sex-specific strategies that have been developed over long periods of time. So an evolutionary approach would lead us to consider how certain navigational skills might be more helpful for one sex than the other. For example, one sex might need more navigational ability that allows them to range more widely. One way this idea can be tested is with various rodent species called voles. In some polygamous vole species, males have a much larger range size than females. But in other species, which tend to be monogamous, there is no sex difference in range size. Evolutionists noticed that in the polygamous vole species, the breeding males had range sizes that spanned 4 to 5 times larger than the range sizes of the females. Whereas in the monogamous vole species, there wasn't any significant sex difference in their range sizes. Males need more spatial ability if and only if they range more widely. So when tested in the laboratory mazes, the males made fewer errors in the polygamous species, but there was little to no sex difference in the monogamous species. What about the parts of the brain, for example, the hippocampus, used to solve these spatial problems? Again, researchers found that the hippocampus was larger only in the males of the polygamous species. These findings suggest the evolutionary need for this spatial ability trait through the link between the voles' demonstration of spatial ability when measured in the mazes and the size of the brain structured when performing the tasks. But this well-supported finding is just one suggested answer to our initial question. Why are there sex differences in spatial navigation? Maybe there are sex differences in the ways humans find food. Think back to your map. How many food locations did you mark? And how often do you visit them? Food is a necessity for life just as much today as it was many, many years ago. But if we look back at how ancestral men and women obtained food, we realize they faced different spatial demands. Males hunted mobile animals. Females gathered stationary or mobile plant resources, such as fruit on trees, that were often seasonal. This required men to be able to navigate a larger range because they would have to find their way home from the hunt with their prey. On the other hand, this required women to navigate more regularly used routes to and from their established gathering spots. These different demands are significant to evolutionists, especially as there have been many interdisciplinary studies that have showed women to prefer navigating using landmarks and route-based strategies, while men are more likely to use wayfinding strategies using shortcuts and cardinal directions such as north-south, east-west. Evolutionists have aimed to push these observations a bit further by considering the cognitive mechanisms involved in these different spatial demands. One particular study, designed by evolutionists, predicted what is called a female advantage for immobile foods. The study had 86 adults, 41 of them being females, navigate the Santa Barbara Farmers Market. Each participant was led on a route of 6 food stalls where they sampled the food items and described their tastes. They were later asked to aim a pointer at each of the 6 food items from the stalls previously visited. And guess what? The females performed better at the task they were evolved to do. While research often shows men to be better at pointing to locations of landmarks and non-food objects, this study showed women to be better when pointing to spatial locations that contain nutritional food resources, supporting the idea that ancestral sex difference in foraging behavior may have shaped sex-specific cognitive adaptations. In conclusion, evolutionary anthropology can help us explain why there are sex differences in spatial navigation from a perspective that takes into account how certain traits take shape over time. An evolutionary approach helps us break down the why part of our question further by reminding us that the traits of organisms reflect what was helpful in their evolutionary past. This way of thinking has produced studies showing that males find their way more accurately in species where they had to travel more widely than females, and that females have a specific spatial advantage that reflects the way they found food in the past. While these findings are crucial to helping interdisciplinary researchers continue to grapple with questions concerning spatial navigation and sex difference, evolutionary anthropology provides a perspective that can help us develop a deeper understanding of how we think about the ways we move through the world, and how attention to difference can enrich this understanding for the better. Thank you.